January 17, 2024, News Report 1. The Taiwan Ministry of National Defense announced on January 17 that on January 16, they detected 9 PLA fighter jets and 3 PLA warships operating in the vicinity of the Taiwan Strait. Among them, 7 PLA fighter jets took off from Jinjiang Airport in Fujian Province, conducting activities around Taiwan but did not cross the Taiwan Strait median line. Additionally, 2 fighter jets crossed the median line, entering the southwest airspace of Taiwan, approximately 47 nautical miles from the southwestern tip of Penghu. Starting from January 16, the Taiwan Ministry of National Defense has been daily reporting PLA activities, providing details such as the PLA fighter jets' takeoff bases and their proximity to Taiwan Island. This increased transparency is aimed at conveying that the military closely monitors every move of the PLA. The information is primarily sourced from the Leshan radar station in Hsinchu, responsible for early warning with a monitoring range of 1,500 kilometers, covering almost the entire East China region and providing the military with 7 to 10 minutes of reaction time. According to the data released by the Taiwan Ministry of National Defense, after the Taiwan elections, the PLA has not engaged in large-scale military activities. The response has been limited to verbal statements. The Taiwan Affairs Office stated in a press conference on January 17 that while there are voices online advocating for the reunification of Taiwan by force, China is willing to create space for peaceful unification, expressing its sincerity in efforts. On January 16, Chinese ambassador to the U.S., Xia Feng, at the New Year's reception, mentioned that the Taiwan issue remains the most important, sensitive, and explosive aspect of U.S.-China relations. He emphasized that the unstable situation in the Taiwan Strait makes it challenging to stabilize U.S.-China relations. The National Security Department, on its WeChat public account, stated that they would intensify efforts in the struggle against Taiwan-related subversion, espionage, and separatism. Minister of the International Department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, Liu Jianchao, visited the U.S. on January 8 and held talks with U.S. Secretary of State Blinken on January 12, mainly discussing the Taiwan elections. Blinken, at the Davos Forum on January 16, expressed that the Chinese government protested his congratulatory message to Tsai Ing-wen on her election as president. He reiterated the U.S.'s adherence to the long-standing One China policy while focusing on maintaining the status quo and peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. He pointed out that China's pressure on Taiwan had backfired, becoming a backdrop for the Taiwan elections, and the U.S. delegation's visit to Taiwan was a response to the situation. News Report 2. The Wall Street Journal reported that China's National Cyberspace Administration is currently conducting a cybersecurity review of Shine. Shine applied for a U.S. IPO in November last year, and the Cyberspace Administration aims to understand the Chinese data disclosed by the company to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. A cybersecurity review usually takes several months to complete, and the specific content of the review is typically determined by relevant authorities. If the review takes an extended period, Shine's IPO plans may be delayed or cancelled. Meanwhile, some have pointed out that Shine is headquartered in Singapore and is not a Chinese company. Its founder, Su Yongtian, holds Singaporean citizenship, and the company's market sales are primarily conducted in the United States, with most of its revenue coming from overseas. In China, Shine only engages in procurement and supply chain operations. Therefore, some argue that the cybersecurity review by China's National Cyberspace Administration lacks justification. Some suggest that Shine's cybersecurity review may be due to the Chinese government's desire to restrict Chinese companies from listing overseas. This could be related to policies under the leadership of Xi Jinping, as overseas listings may lead to owners transferring assets abroad, making them difficult to regulate. Critics argue that the Chinese government should not overly interfere with the market, as it may reduce the entry of foreign enterprises into the Chinese market. This move could be seen as unwise, potentially negatively impacting China's image in attracting foreign investment. News Report 3. On January 16, the Canadian government announced new national security rules, stating that Canadian universities and researchers collaborating with foreign institutions deemed a threat to national security will lose federal funding. The new rules list over 100 foreign institutions considered a threat to Canada's national security, including 85 Chinese universities and research institutions. These institutions include the PLA Military Science Academy, Beihang University, Beijing University of Aeronautics and Astronautics, Harbin Institute of Technology, Hunan University, Sichuan University, Tianjin University, Xi'an University of Technology, Xi'an University of Technology, and others. It's worth noting that on January 4, the Canadian Federal Court ruled that Chinese student Li Yaokong is a potential spy, leading to his denial of entry into Canada. This ruling may indicate an increased likelihood of Chinese students from these 85 universities facing stricter scrutiny when applying for Canadian study permits. While it cannot be confirmed that this will definitely increase, the regulation could lead to more rigorous examination of Chinese student applications for studying in Canada. News Report 4. The European Parliament is set to vote on January 18 on whether to strip Hungary of its voting rights in the European Council. The vote, initiated by 120 members of the European Parliament on January 12, references Article 7(2) of the EU Treaty, aiming to decide whether to revoke Hungary's voting rights. The vote will investigate the legitimacy of the EU Commission's decision in December to unfreeze €10.2 billion for Hungary, intended to improve Hungary's judicial independence in exchange for Hungary's support for Ukraine's EU accession. European Parliament members criticized Hungary for obstructing EU economic aid to Ukraine and accused Hungary of blackmailing the EU for more funds, thus undermining the rule of law and cooperation within the EU. This vote requires the approval of two-thirds of the European Parliament members to pass, marking the first step. The second step involves leaders of the European Council voting unanimously to decide whether to suspend Hungary's voting rights temporarily. The third step is for the European Council to vote on whether to strip Hungary of its rights, including legislative and veto rights. Hungary has long been accused by some EU countries of being a Trojan horse for Russia within the EU, hindering support for Ukraine. Hungary's Prime Minister stated that he does not object, but believes it is too late, expressing confidence that this event will not stop. News Report 5. On January 17, the navies of the United States, Japan, and South Korea conducted a 3-day joint military exercise in the open seas south of Jeju-do Island, South Korea. The purpose of this exercise is to enhance the joint capabilities of the three countries to deter North Korean nuclear missiles. The exercise includes activities to prevent the maritime transport of weapons of mass destruction, eliminate maritime security threats, promote trilateral cooperation, and establish a rules-based international order. The participating vessels include the U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson, the South Korean missile destroyer ROKS Chungmugung-e Sun-sin, and the Japanese Kongo-class destroyer. The scale of this exercise is unusually large this year, expected to address the escalating military threats from North Korea. Recent actions by North Korea have raised concerns, bringing South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. together for joint exercises. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, in a speech on January 15 at the Supreme People's Assembly, stated that reunification with South Korea is no longer possible. He defined South Korea as the top enemy and a permanent major enemy, implying that in the event of war, North Korea would occupy, subdue, and recover South Korea, incorporating it into North Korea's territory. This speech has raised concerns about the escalating tension in the region. News Report 6. On January 17, the Deputy Secretary for Home Affairs of the Hong Kong Financial Secretary's Office, Eric Tsang, stated in a radio program that the Hong Kong government plans to install 2,000 surveillance cameras in the areas with the highest concentration of people. Sang mentioned that the purpose of installing cameras is to prevent crime but refused to disclose specific installation locations and whether the cameras have facial recognition capabilities. He affirmed that facial recognition functionality would likely be present, especially in areas with high foot traffic. The Hong Kong government upgraded surveillance cameras to high-definition 4K cameras in 2020, and these cameras were successful in arresting 2 suspects involved in the 831 incident related to Prince Edward Station. This move by the Hong Kong government has raised concerns about privacy and has been used for monitoring and controlling society. Pan Jiawei, a China researcher at Amnesty International, pointed out that Hong Kong police might use these surveillance cameras to monitor specific political figures, such as installing them near the residences of pro-democracy individuals for long-term surveillance. Additionally, industry reports indicate that mainland China had 570 million surveillance cameras as of 2021, capable of conducting 3 billion checks per second. Coupled with social media and electronic payment systems, this forms a digital authoritarian tool, as described. Simultaneously, Jimmy Lai, the founder of Next Digital, continues to face trial on charges of conspiring with foreign forces on January 17. The prosecution summoned former mayor of Apple Daily, Chung Kin-hong, as a witness. Chung Kin-hong stated that Jimmy Lai pursued democracy and freedom, called on citizens to protest, exerted pressure on the Hong Kong government, and held meetings weekly after the 2014 Occupy Central movement, advocating a margin-touching policy. The prosecution sees this as evidence that Jimmy Lai influenced the editorial policy of Apple Daily, seeking sanctions against Hong Kong officials by Western countries. News Report 7. Foreign ministers of EU member states will convene on January 22 to discuss plans for the Honghai escort operation. If the plan is approved, the EU is expected to commence commercial ship escort operations in late February. Meanwhile, the geopolitical tensions in the Honghai region have led to an increasing number of shipping companies announcing the suspension of transportation services in the area. On January 17, a Japanese oil tanker company announced the suspension of all routes passing through Honghai, while Chowtai announced the indefinite suspension of all petroleum transport through the Red Sea last week. LNG carriers from Qatar have also ceased passing through the Red Sea. In addition, insurance companies have started refusing to provide insurance for merchant ships passing through the Red Sea. The Houthis armed group is gradually gaining influence in the region. In the Middle East, Qatar and France have mediated and successfully pushed for an agreement between Israel and Hamas. According to the agreement, both parties agreed to provide emergency medicine for 45 hostages and provide humanitarian medical aid to civilians in Gaza. A spokesperson for the U.S. National Security Council, Kobe, stated in a routine press conference that Israel would also reach another agreement with Hamas regarding the release of Israeli hostages and a ceasefire. These events indicate that the geopolitical turmoil in the Honghai region is having far-reaching effects on international shipping and security. We will continue to monitor and report on further developments. News Report 8. Radio Free Asia reported a serious train accident in North Korea, which occurred on December 26 last year. The accident led to the derailment of the train, causing it to fall into a valley with over 400 passengers on board, resulting in numerous casualties. The train departed from Pyongyang on that day, heading to Kumgal Station in South Hamgyong Province. The train encountered power problems at Kumgal Station, unable to climb the slope. The entire train reversed and derailed at a bend, causing the rear 7 carriages to fall into the valley. Due to the significant number of casualties, the North Korean government established a body disposal team and designated the area as an emergency zone, strictly prohibiting the spread of information. This incident highlights the highly closed and controlled measures taken by the North Korean regime in the face of disasters, characterized by limited transparency and openness. Such behavior is common in authoritarian regimes, and their handling methods often lack transparency and openness. News Report 9. Buzz Report, According to data released by the Japan Tourism Agency, 25.06 million foreign tourists visited Japan in 2023, reaching only 78% of the 2019 level. However, these foreign tourists spent a total of 52.923 trillion yen, equivalent to $338 billion, representing a 9% increase from 2019. Taiwanese tourists had the highest spending, reaching $5.2 billion, followed closely by Chinese tourists who spent $5.1 billion. South Korea ranked third, with its tourists spending $5 billion in Japan. The data shows that the average spending per foreign tourist in Japan was 210,000 yen, approximately $1,500. Due to the depreciation of the yen, foreign tourists find traveling to Japan very cost-effective, leading to longer stays and increased expenses on accommodation and leisure. News Report 10. On January 15, there were rumors circulating online about a massive financial scandal involving Dingyifeng in Shenzhen, with an estimated scale of 500 billion yen and tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of investors affected. The latest developments indicate that one of the co-founders of Dingyifeng, Ma Xiaoqiu, has fled to the United States and is currently seeking asylum. According to Securities Times on January 16, Ma Xiaoqiu took away 3 billion yen, and the funds have been transferred to the United States. Shenzhen police are working to repatriate the funds to domestically cover and repay investors. A manager from Dingyifeng's international department stated that Ma Xiaoqiu took away 3 billion yen, and the funds have been transferred to the United States. Therefore, Shenzhen police need to repatriate the funds. However, if the scale of the funds involved is in the hundreds of billions, the 3 billion yen is evidently insufficient. Ma Xiaoqiu and Sui Guangyi jointly founded Dingyifeng in January 2011. In February of last year, Ma Xiaoqiu resigned from the board of Dingyifeng and all positions. Rumors began circulating in the middle of last year that the two were not getting along. Some reports suggest that Ma Xiaoqiu took away investment funds. Dingyifeng claims a 3-year return rate of triple, triggering a frenzy of investment from investors. As of January 10, Dingyifeng issued a notice to investors, basically promising returns every quarter, but now there has been no payout. The situation of a financial collapse seems unavoidable. On January 16, investors gathered at the office building of JKBH Times Square in Shenzhen to request refunds, but it is currently unclear whether they will be successful.